Go. It's recording. Let's dive right in. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Kirsta Sayer. Kirsty, welcome to Balls in Your Face Marketing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on for this very special impromptu episode and for helping me come and tell this story, which is amazing and something that I think is definitely worth telling. I didn't know you, a week ago. I had no clue who you were.
A week ago, I was out in the ether.
So why don't you tell me, why don't you take it from there? Who are you? Who are you in relation to me?
Okay, am I crazy close to the camera now? I can't really tell.
It's good, you're in frame.
I'm fine? Okay.
You're in frame, yeah.
So my husband got me a DNA test. It's Ancestry, right? Ancestry DNA. For Christmas, because I really was interested in knowing more about my family. It was, ironically, my mom was quite into genealogy, but I didn't hear about it myself. I don't know why. I don't know how this happened, but and so I was interested in finding out more about the family because I kind of lost contact with my own. And so I did the DNA test about a month ago. And I was quite sad because the sides that I identify with the most sort of showed up really sketchy, like not a lot. I'm not that Italian or Greek according to my DNA. So I was like, oh, well, whatever. I know I am because our grandfather's Greek. And what is that? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So this is What we first of all is we are second cousins. Yeah, we are second cousins.
We're second cousins.
And so only through modern technology and social media is even just a connection like this
possible. Because I was just like, well, what else is out there? This thing is like been a huge disappointment. I wish I hadn't found out. And then I saw that it had another option to check out, like, do you have any relatives? And it said, oh, you have a second cousin. So it's like, cool. And you were the only one which had any kind of identifying feature. Like you had a photo. So
I received, somebody gave me a DNA test for Ancestry almost maybe, let's say 2 years ago. Okay. And I hadn't, and so, and the same thing, like I have a database of my family tree, and I'm kind of interested in this kind of stuff as well. But again, the results didn't really show much in terms of anybody who was closely related who I didn't know.
So you didn't have anybody pop up like before?
No, I found like family tree information that was stuff that I'd already known.
Yeah. Well, I was like, oh, okay. I think I saw I think there was just one second cousin, and I was like, I wonder what that even means. And then you had a photo, so I looked you up on Facebook, and you looked like family. You looked familiar. You were like, wow. I was amazed at how much you looked like my brother and my cousin in South Africa. So I was like, okay, this is legit. And I reached out to you and I said, hi, I think I'm your cousin. And you were like, oh. And I thought, this guy is not having it. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not a scammer. I know how this must seem. So what was your reaction?
Well, for sure. I had an immediate open mind. I mean, you dove right in saying like, okay, I did the test on Ancestry. I had done it. So I
didn't give any leading.
You were just like, hi, here's who I am and so on. But it quickly all kind of started to make sense.
Yeah.
Very quickly, and seem and sound legit. And then as we started to work it out, okay, then I realized, okay, yes, so this is the connection is on my maternal grandfather's side. My grandfather was brothers, I think, with your grandfather. If I've got this right.
The photo we have, yours is the baby, the little boy sitting on the knee.
Right. And so as you and I are having this conversation, I'm, and this is now sort of going over a couple of days, in fact, and I'm now reaching out to my mom and saying, okay, so I think I found a second cousin on the Greek side, on my grandfather's side. Started telling you a bit about her. She reaches out to my aunt. Pictures start flying back and forth.
And that was amazing for me.
And
that was so cool.
And so this is, I think, a big part of the story. And this is why, again, what I think is this was amazing to me too. So I started sharing, and I'm gonna share, your page if I can here. So here's one of this picture I send you, and I say, okay, here's Gail's first wedding.
No, Gina.
Sorry, Gina's. Sorry, you're right. Sorry. Here's a picture of Gina's first wedding.
Yeah, this was trippy.
So what happened?
And so I'm like, Gina, as in Gina, my mom. I'm looking close. I'm like, that looks so much like my mom. I'm like, is that my dad? And he's like, what? Are you serious?
Yeah. I was like, seriously? Like I was like, wait, what are you like? Well, it was such a shock to me. It was like, what are you saying? Yes, this is your mom. And yes, this is your dad. And what do you mean? What do you mean? You don't like, is that your dad? Yes.
Well, at that point I figured I better start talking fast, because then it did probably seem like a bit of a scam. Like, Gina, like, why don't you know your own mother's name? I was like, but I was trying to, it was so out of context, because I wasn't expecting you to have my mom's wedding photo, which I've never seen. And I'd not seen my dad, certainly not at that age. I was adopted by my stepfather at like 18 months old, and then all contact with my dad ceased, and he later died. And so a couple of years ago, I asked my mom if she had any photos of him, and she sent me some as a child. And so I've not ever seen him as a young man. And it was so, oh my goodness, I was so emotional. It was such a weird moment, a lot of feelings. And he looks so much like my son Gabe. So that was just a really like a huge thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, it was massive for me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can imagine that, and being estranged from your father like that, and so you reestablished a connection with him towards his final years, right?
I did. He made contact because it wasn't sort of my an estrangement that I had anything to do with. I was just cut off. We didn't have any contact with him, and it was not by our choice. And I wondered about him my whole childhood. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really kind of touchy subject and what have you. So I didn't pursue it. And then as a young woman, I started to sort of, I think I asked my grandmother, who I'd stayed in contact with, and he wrote me a letter, and we started to have this correspondence, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. I was really getting to, enjoy the idea of getting to know him, but it was shortly after that he died suddenly. So I really didn't get to put any pieces together. It was sad.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the part of the story that I just found that made this again just so incredibly compelling and worth talking about. On two fronts, really. One is that because there's two subjects here that are very sort of taboo and difficult and rarely discussed in our society. One which is that it is estrangement from a parent. So many people experience that throughout their lives, and what I've noticed, what I've observed of that is, regardless of whether they were raised by loving, wonderful parents, who or were adopted, or whatever the case might be,
right,
there always remains this longing, this empty feeling, this sense of of questioning of who they are and where they come from, and it's something that's people very much struggle with. And I think the other side of of this story, which if you're comfortable talking a bit about, is that separation. Like, you know, what is that like when your mother does that, you know, separates you from your father like that, and what's it like? And maybe if we can even talk a bit about who that stepfather and replacement father was and what that was like.
Well, that's interesting. You should ask. So when you said, you know, this estrangement, it is such a loaded thing to become estranged from your family in any way. You know, to be disconnected from your roots is damaging, I feel, you know, on a pretty fundamental level. And I think that's why so many people have sort of taken to these DNA tests to try and sort of fill that gap, you know, that we are compelled to find out our history, or just to find out who our people are. And so interestingly enough is that, you know, in recent years, and honestly, mere months ago, like less than 3 months ago, the sort of estrangement from my mother became complete. Which has been, of course, a very tragic process, because we were close. You know, I always was a mommy's girl, and so that has just become necessary as I've sort of pursued my mental health and tried to see, you know, the very sort of sad story of my childhood, started to reconcile with it and get therapy and realize that. So to sort of put that in context, my stepfather was abusive. And really abusive, and it's sort of been a difficult thing to get him to take responsibility for that, and for my mom has chosen not to leave him in light of some very, very serious abuse from, you know, and that's been backed up by siblings, and he sort of admitted to it and then walked it back. So, you know, that's a story that's not really, unfortunately, is very much not unique to me.
No, it's not at all unique.
And especially when it comes to a step parent, I think so many, you know, people can relate to that, how sad that is, and how just damaging it can be.
You know, it's incredibly damaging. I mean, this is, you know, there's a timeliness to this in a way, right? I don't know whether I watched it. It was this with this documentary, HBO documentary on leaving Neverland, right? Which was these two.
And I stay away from that.
Which you know, I can totally understand. And what I found very compelling and interesting about it as a documentary is ignore the fact that it's Michael Jackson, and ignore any debate, although I don't think there really is one, especially after this documentary, about whether or not he was guilty of what he's accused of. Regardless, that video definitely demonstrates, one, what the grooming process looks like.
Oh my word, yes. That's what my therapist was telling me. She said it's mesmerizing to see how that plays out.
The director did an incredible job working through it chronologically to really give you a picture of what that looks like, and how that grooming process doesn't just happen for the child.
Right.
You know, it happens for
everybody
for everybody around them.
Right.
How slow and gradual it is, and if that person is any good at it, you don't even know that it's happening to you. Right, and so you understand why it takes so many years for people to deal with this, and again, how much it damages the whole family.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And for a long time, not for a long time, but I kept it, I kept it a secret, which I was determined to take to the grave, because as part of the grooming process, this narrative around the family was established, and sort of this effort to make him a very credible witness and me less credible, and then the slow isolation of me, came after I sort of started to assert myself a little bit and be like, you know, this ain't right. Something's gone wrong here. But then you downplay it and downplay it and downplay it. And then you start to wonder, you know, like, I don't know. There was a lot of factors involved, and one of them was my instinct and desire to protect my family. You know, against all odds, whatever happens to me, I'll be the sacrificial lamb and what have you. And then at one point I just snapped, and I think that happens to a lot of people. And then they're like, well, you know, why would you come up with this story now?
No,
You know?
no. Well, I think again what that documentary illustrates, because for in both instances, both men, one of the major contributing factors in allowing them to come out with it, was the fact that they had children themselves. And I think the thing is that kind of abuse robs people of their childhood in such a way that they no longer, growing up, even remember or relate to what a child is like.
Oh, okay, that's a good.
In part, you know, and then also they have that instinct of what, you know, protecting their own child, and all of a sudden then they start to what was exactly what had been normalized internally and regarded as perhaps, you know, even feeling like, you know, it was more your fault, that you're responsible, that, you know, what, like all the training, the things that have been drilled into your brain of why you can't tell.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden they start to envision something like that happening to their child, and then it triggers that, well, wait a minute.
It really did. And what happened for me was that I obviously, you know, trying to unravel this, I'd been raised in a really religious, conservative religious, the Mormon Church. And so this idea of, you know, family above all else, obey the patriarchy very much, submit to the man, he's always right, he's the priesthood holder, and he, you know, is the patriarch of the family. And there's a lot of, you know, sort of emphasis on a patriarch, and, you know, your dad is not wrong, he's this righteous man by the church's standards. And I bought into it, all of it, like it. And so there was this like constant confusion, like, okay, but why is this good man doing this bad thing, to the extent that you're just in this constant state of kind of like disconnect. You're just so confused all the time. So it was when I went back, after I sort of distanced myself from the idea of the church being like infallible, and I tried to I wanted my kids to know South Africa and everything, and I took them, and I decided, you know, everything's fine, because I figured my dad had told my mom, he had told me he told me that he had confessed, and everything was sorted out. And I was like, yeah, cool. If the church says he's cool, then he's cool, and I must just forgive and forget. And I was 100% willing to do that. And then I went back with my kids, and which would make you think, what the hell, right? Like, what kind of mother would do this? But I was just like fully like, yeah, it's totally good. It's all gone. And then I started to see, he didn't, you know, I was really protective over my kids when I was there, but I started to sort of just, I think something just snapped in me, and I was like, you are a monster, you know? And so after a short while, I recognized who he was, that he hadn't changed. He didn't violate my kids or anything, but it was just, I suddenly sort of, the scales fell off my eyes, and I was suddenly like, what the hell? And I packed up everything that same night and left. And nobody else in the family knew, and it was really drama. And my siblings were super unimpressed with me, and I was going to lose my siblings too. And at that point, I just sort of blew the story, and I told them what had happened. And there's just been a slow process of the siblings sort of believing me and estranging themselves from him, and gradually from my mom, because she's staying with the family. But it's really fractured our family, which from the outside was always this very perfect, enviable, very highly connected family. And I'm very family orientated. So I was always like hugely like sort of bonded, and always trying to get us all together. And, you know, I'm a real family person. So this this new individual that I am, who says to you, yeah, I'm not in contact with my family, or we're estranged, it seems like I'm playing a part. It's like, I've seen this in movies. It's not me. And so this is a timely thing, and not to like freak you out and be like, I'm going to try and glom onto your family now. Can we come for Christmas? It's not like that. But it's just that sense of, okay, you know, there's that loss, but there's also a sense of pieces it's healing for me, because it appears that you've had a really functional upbringing. And, you know, from what I could tell, you seem really fond of your people. And, you know, you've told me really lovely stories about your grandfather, and I don't know, it's just a healing thing. Like this morning, even when I was running, I was thinking about the story of, you know, our great grandfather and the things that he went through. And I was just like, you know, we come from survivors, and there's a series of people who have done difficult things, you know, did their best and kept and here are, you know, the ancestors standing, and we're all doing our thing in different ways. And that was a healing thing. It's just been healing. And seeing those photos and seeing my dad and how he looks like my sons, and, you know, it's been incredibly, there was a day after I first saw that photo, and I don't know if you saw on Facebook, people were like, you must have a lot of feelings. And I was like, I'm freaking angry. I'm grieving today.
Right.
Because I started to process the idea that my mother had taken me away from my father, and my oldest sister away from our father, and not allowed him, well, I think it was more the stepfather, who is the typical sort of controlling, abusive, narcissist type of person. You know, who cut off all contact. But I was like, that's dreadful. I've not even processed how horrible that is. Yeah. And now it's too late. So there was a day that I was processing that with a lot of anger and grief and sort of loss. It was a really kind of mixed up day. But I'm sort of circling around and seeing how, you know, well, we can't control the past, but yeah, it's not, you know, it's not so we have a future.
Yeah, look, you know, I mean, I can understand. I can totally imagine and expect that that you would go through those emotions and you know, especially to look at you know, a picture of your father around, you know, what he would look like around your you know, your youth, your childhood, those precious years that you could have had with him, and that was the man, and that's what he looked like, and to see that. And to confront, you know, being robbed of that, I can totally imagine and understand that would be emotional.
It was emotional, yeah, for sure.
You know, and you know, I think this is something that I have been and certainly actually will be talking even more about how, you know, it speaks to just our need, our fundamental need to connect. And to know our roots too, you know, and our need for meaning. Like I really do believe very strongly that we as a species are meaning seeking above all else, above being wealth seeking or success seeking or fame seeking. We really seek meaning. Right. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This which is that idea that we have to sort of progress through this sequence of need fulfillment, and that you can't kind of progress to the next one. But that's largely been disproven, in the sense that, you know, higher up after your sort of basic fundamental needs is that need for connectivity, for bonding, for relationships. But I think what we've discovered is that people actually crave that and require that, you know, in any and all situations.
And we really, I was surprised by how like emotionally sort of like taken I was with this idea of these relatives and their stories. And because honestly, I was so put off by my mom's obsession with genealogy, which was church driven, because, you know, because the Mormon Church is really good with genealogy, and they do it so that they can baptize others into the religion. And so I was always like, ew, not for me, because it was like one more thing that you had to do to qualify for heaven, and there was already like 10,000 of them, and I just didn't want to spend all Sunday afternoons going to like stuffy libraries like they were doing. And so I could never understand it. But then when I just when I saw those photos and it made it real, like everything about me makes more sense, even with the tiny snippets. And I was so surprised by that sensation, because I'm not generally like that. I'm not a seeker of, past stories, but it helps. It all helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and by the way, so I would say, you're largely right that I consider myself very fortunate in terms of my family and my upbringing, being born here in Canada, and my grandparents, who here in Canada, who were amazing, and over in Holland, they were amazing. Our shit stinks too.
Everybody has something.
Right. There's always some eccentricities and some imperfect behaviors for sure. But without it, and it's very funny when you brought up that sort of idea from the church of the patriarchy and of a family, and which is we hear a lot about that these days, and you and I had this little chat about that the other day too. But it's very funny and foreign to me because to me growing up, the head of my family was my grandmother, my mom's mom.
That's cool.
She was, we were a matriarchy.
Yeah.
She was in charge of the family. So, and even to me, my wife pretty much makes most of the decisions in our house, or, certainly the buying decisions.
Same. I run the shit.
You run the show. Yeah. The women run the show. Totally. Right. So
I mean, it's sort of, I think we're less of a patriarchal society than we realize, unless you're in this sort of more fundamentalist religions, these more conservative religions where it's very real and it's very emphasized. So
I think look, I think this I find the discussion of it and the topic of it is slightly corrosive, in the sense that overall, without a doubt, men and women have been different over the centuries, and that creates tensions and problems and inequities.
Right.
But for the most part, as a species, that I think, we have worked in, we are dependent on each other. We rely on each other. We have worked in partnership. This has never been about one, having dominion over the other for the most part. Well,
I think that's definitely a healthy way to go. And I think that's probably why I was sort of, it didn't work for me to continue with that kind of pattern, because I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's sustainable or good for a family, for anybody to sort of
and I think
be revered as the boss one way or the other. I'm just like, there's a lot of areas where my husband drives the bus and a lot of areas where I drive the bus, and we take turns. Bus drivers need rest. And
I think this experience and what you speak to, that sort of inner feeling, is that what and there's, I think, a lot of data behind this that shows that what societies thrive when it has healthy families. When the society itself is very sort of supportive and encouraging of supporting the family unit, and you have this intrinsic, as you're saying, this very intrinsic family orientation, which certainly probably is probably also sort of maybe naturally more of a feminine trait, perhaps slightly than some men, perhaps, but
possibly.
But I think of a lot of the majority of men too are, in fact, this is what has worked best for us as a species, and we know this. And this story is a great example of the damage that gets done.
Yeah.
And when they get split apart, and when people get, so I
think my children, I went on to have 5 kids, just like the family that I'd come from, and my husband is from 5 children, and we have your grandfather and my grandfather brothers, and they were one of 4 before their mom tragically died at a very young age. And I'm so excited now that you've given me the ability to show them photos and to make these connections. And I think somebody said how musical somebody was in the family. I'm not sure whom, but my cousin in South Africa, who's related to us, or to you directly as well, is very musical, and my sons are very musical, my daughter and everything. So it's like being able to tell these stories and give that generation what I feel like I didn't have, in terms of understandings. And
that I was like in a band and stuff, right?
Huh?
You know that I was like in a band and started a whole bunch of music.
I did not know that.
I have composed I have a song that's an opening track in a film.
Are you serious? Oh my goodness. So you and Chris in South Africa definitely need to connect.
Oh, okay.
Because he has a band and he's musical and he composes music, and my son Ben will also love to be a part.
There's some great music coming out of South Africa. I love some of it.
Yeah. South Africa has some great everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so actually my other son Gabe has a band, and they might even play tonight for a St. Patty's Day party. So it's really kind of like this is the musical side of the family, and it's so exciting to be able to, I've been inundating the family group chat with my kids, me and my kids and my husband's chat all week with these photos, and like, I guess do you see Finny in him, or do you see Ella in this one? And it's really exciting. And
I actually I have to say, I was just like, okay, this is the closest that I will ever know to what I might look like as a woman. And look at me, I'm beautiful. There you go.
And I am a very good looking man.
There you go.
And you know what? You look so much like my brother Seth and my cousin Chris. So I really would like you to meet them. So
I look forward to it.
Yeah, cool.
Kirsty, thanks so much for doing this, and especially for coming on and being willing to speak so openly about your story. Because again, like it's like, as you said, I think it's something that a lot of people have experienced. It's something that doesn't get spoken about, and your willingness to, and your bravery, frankly, to talk and speak openly. And you have a blog and a podcast. You talk a bit about, I think, these kinds of things, don't you?
I do. I have a podcast called Mental Notes from My Minivan, and I talk a lot about this journey that I've been on, recovering kind of from my childhood abuse, and how that's been a really good and fascinating adventure, and you can really overcome all sorts of things that you think are going to be with you forever, with the right kind of help and persistence and hope. And so, yeah, if you've got a story, shoot that. And I'm also my blog is Momedy Sketch.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
okay, so
thank
people
you so much.
Check that out. Obviously, she's made of good stock.
Absolutely. Now it's proven.
Now it's proven. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Thank you so much for this, and for being so, like, I know you had your big launch at the exact time that I popped out of the woodwork, and you took time to talk to me and send me those photos, and I really appreciate it. And I'm
I live for this. I love this. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shiny disco ball.